Wall Street veteran Bernard Madoff has been arrested and charged with running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme.
Congress wants to know what caused the Enron meltdown.
Now, while the collective rage currently is focused on WorldCom,
Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski was convicted of looting hundreds of millions of dollars.
This is one of the biggest fraud cases ever.
Their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Find out more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
Unless you are someone's crazy uncle that keeps cash hidden throughout their house because you believe that lizard people run the government, you have probably used a bank. As evil as they are, and we have many episodes that can attest to some of the worst examples, banks are an integral part of modern society. Imagine if Paris Hilton had to pay for a Balenciaga hoodie that looks like it got run over by a semi-truck, but still cost $30,000 in gold coins instead of using her Amex. The weight alone would break her small circumference wrists. Yeah, they're about the same. You're not paying for a Balenciaga hoodie either in gold coins, Nina. Sorry, you got them Victorian wrists. Recently, though, banks have been getting into more trouble than usual, and this time they are facing some repercussions for their actions. Recently, Silicon Valley Bank, which catered towards tech startups, found their doors being closed as their assets were seized by the government as 4 decades of banking history collapsed in just a few days. This bank collapse is the second largest in history behind Washington Mutual, which collapsed during the 2008 financial crisis, with more bank closings trailing after it. What is the story behind why Silicon Valley Bank now lies in ruins? Why do people care in the first place? Do I know anything about how banks work? How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop?
69.
Why? Don't answer, they're rhetorical. Why do people always ask so many questions in rapid succession at the end of intro pieces? Some of these and more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
I don't love a Tootsie Pop unless it's cherry.
Why do they feel? Come up with new candies. Stop putting other candies inside of candies. Tootsie Pops? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Gross.
They are in classrooms across America.
I've seen more Dum Dums.
Well, because they're cheaper. And that is a perfect example of our economy nowadays, that all the Tootsie Pops are being switched out for Dum Dums. And honestly, that's a really good example of why we're talking about Silicon Valley Bank.
Because it was run by a bunch of Dum Dums?
Yeah. Ooh. What flavor were they? Corruption. It was corruption.
Oh, it was mystery flavor, which is corruption.
Mystery flavor is corruption.
Yeah. I like green apple myself.
I'm a grape guy.
Ew.
Or cotton candy. Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of White Collars, Red Hands. It's Kashan.
And Nina.
And we're back to talk about a story y'all have probably heard of by now. Unless you live under a rock and you only come out to listen to this podcast. In which case, thank you.
Let me educate you.
And they do know all of your thoughts. The government knows all your thoughts. Stay under that rock.
Before we get started, should I give the update first? Or?
Oh, yeah, please. We got an update.
All right, we've got an update, people. Before we jump into this story, last season we did an episode on Vince McMahon, the founder of WWE, and all of his scandals and stuff like that.
Which popped off, by the way. Thank you. It's got a lot of listens so far.
It's a good episode. It's a really good episode. And we found out that this week, WWE did get sold. They are merging. The Saudis are not taking it over, though, which I think is a good thing, personally, because now gay people and women can keep their jobs.
True.
Which is great. They are merging with Endeavor Group. WWE is merging with Endeavor Group, which is part of UFC. So they are going to be starting a new company. It doesn't have a name yet, but it's valued at $21 billion.
WWUFC with an E at the end.
Yeah, something like that. Who knows what it's going to be, but that is our update. Vince McMahon is still going to be a chairman. He's going to get his way, unfortunately.
This means Dana White gets to be upset and yell in 2 different companies now.
Hell yeah.
And he can stop doing that slap boxing thing that he's been hosting recently.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Dana, I don't know. I just keep seeing videos online. Dana White endorsed this like competition where two men stand across from each other and slap each other and try to knock each other out.
I don't know what this person even looks like.
Dana White?
Oh, this guy.
He runs the UFC. He's the Coke
Bro,
founder.
this guy does not look like his name is Dana.
Yeah, he looks like fucking thick Mr. Clean.
No, don't
Fixter Clean.
Fixter Clean. Don't insult Mr. Clean like that. Honestly, Mr. Clean, pretty hot cartoon.
Oh my god.
I'd bang Mr. Clean.
He's so bald.
Yeah, then
He's so aggressively bald.
I love it. I can lick the sweat off his bald little head.
What's with you and licking sweat off of stuff today? The people at home don't know, but you had a whole conversation about it before. It's too much. Too much for one day.
I think it's just been a while.
Okay, well, you know what's not going to be a while? This intro, hopefully. Let's talk about Silicon Valley Bank. So the year is 1983. And two men who probably just ripped a fat line of coke were playing poker in Santa Cruz, California. Just one, I said. We don't want to.
I was doing one for each of them.
Oh well, that's very nice of you. They shared one actually, like
that's hot.
Like the Tramp.
And, like Lady and the Tramp.
Like Lady and the Tramp.
Like a spaghetti noodle, but it was a line of coke.
Exactly.
And then they like kissed because both their noses touched, and they were like, "Oh my god, butterfly kisses."
That's what was cute back in 1983, Wall Street.
They're like, "Don't tell."
They told. And Bill Biggerstaff, who I hope has an ironically small penis, was an executive at Wells Fargo, and Robert.
He can't get it up. He's like, no, I swear I have a bigger staff.
It's in my name. And Robert Medeiros was a professor at Stanford. The two men had met back when they both worked as branch managers at Bank of America. But this night, between the cigars and whiskey, they hatched an idea for a new kind of bank.
A new kind of bank?
A new kind of bank. You see, startup companies are important.
Yes, they are.
Especially in the tech business, where small companies start the work on technology when they seem much too risky for well-established companies to work on it. And many breakthroughs come from these startup companies. In the tech world, a lot of the times, new tech is built by these startup companies, but they don't have enough money to bring it to scale. So all these huge companies, that's actually what they do, is they go out and they buy all these small companies that made breakthroughs and then just scale it up and sell it. So they're important. The only issue is that they're hardly ever profitable, at least for a very long time, because they need to get off their feet. They need to develop the technology. That takes time. That takes people, and it doesn't make a lot of money. So they need what's known as angel and seed investing capital to develop potentially life-altering technologies. A lot of the companies that Silicon Valley Bank dealt with were life sciences companies, so a lot of medical technologies here. And at the time, there wasn't a bank that catered to these businesses in the 1980s. Startups weren't even that big of a thing, you know.
They were just starting up.
Exactly. Yeah, startup.
The startups were just starting up in 1983.
This was the startup bank. Bill and Robert decided that they were going to be that bank that caters to these companies. And in 1983, they opened the doors to Silicon Valley Bank, named so because, and you're not gonna fucking guess, okay? You're not gonna guess this. They're named Silicon Valley Bank, all right? Because it was a bank, okay? And here's the key part: it was in Silicon Valley.
Oh my god!
So hence
I never would have guessed that.
Hence the name Silicon.
What creative guys, you know?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Bankers.
They should have really been writers or something.
Creative people in another life.
In another life. Okay.
They structured loans to be more beneficial to startups because they knew these companies wouldn't have the capital to make loan payments, or at least large loan payments early on after the loan. They needed to take the money and develop the technology before they became profitable. They also got the likes of former NFL quarterback Jim Plunkett.
Love that guy.
To be a face man for the business, as well as some other well-known people in banking to give them credibility. I just didn't name them because maybe one old person out there knows who the fuck Jim Plunkett is.
I don't know who that is.
I don't know who it is either, and I like football. I've heard the name. I couldn't tell you anything about them. They also tried to give their clients access to resources that would help their business and thereby Silicon Valley Bank's investment in that business grow, such as connecting them with venture capital funds, as well as connecting them with accounting and law firms for consultations on things. Basically, like, help them not only get the money, but also all of the resources they need to become profitable companies. And because SVB, I think at the beginning, they asked for some, like, crazy amount of, like, equity in your company, like 50% equity in your company to be able to do all this.
Wow.
But it worked because over the years, Silicon Valley Bank became so sought after in the startup world that multiple venture capital firms would actually require companies that they invested with to open an account at Silicon Valley Bank as part of the requirements to get their investing.
Interesting.
And this meant that Silicon Valley Bank was raking in the money. In less than a decade, they turned what was a loss in 1985 into $12.3 million in annual profit in 1991. They did hit some rocky patches a little bit later through the dot-com bubble and in the 2008 financial crisis. But by 2023, 4 decades into operation, they held accounts with over 1/2 of all startup companies in America.
Wow. And
held branches all across the world. They had expanded internationally at this point. As I said, they hit some rocky patches. During the dot-com bubble, Silicon Valley Bank's stock price fell by 50%, although it obviously rebounded. And Silicon Valley Bank took TARP money, which is the relief plan money that was given out to banks in the 2008 financial crisis. But as we mentioned in the Lehman Brothers episode way back in the day, you want to learn more about what caused the 2008 financial crisis? You're young, and at this point, if you're 17... that means that you were like 3 when that happened.
Yeah.
Which is, we're getting old, Nina.
I know.
You know? But if you don't know...
I'm the one who's 30. I don't want to hear about it.
I'm close. People mention about it all the time. You want to learn a little bit more about it? Check our Lehman Brothers episode out. But at that time, the government did come out with... We talked about how the government came out with a net profit on TARP and all the investments they made in the bank. They actually made their money back plus the interest. So it worked out okay for the government. So in 2023, Silicon Valley Bank actually seemed set up for more success. The tech industry was in a downturn, but 2021 had been their most profitable year to date. And they only had a slight regression in 2022, which is no surprise since Silicon Valley Bank was one of the first banks, as most of these new banks are, to deal with digital currency startups, which took a big hit in 2022. Check out Blockchain Blockheads or FTX for that, which we'll mention in a second. And much worse happened to other financial institutions that were all dealing in them. Once again, FTX. So what caused the Jimmy John's collapse? Freakishly fast, that is.
Holy shit, that's freaky fast.
Is that still their slogan?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know, but I fucking love Jimmy John's.
I hate Jimmy John's.
What's wrong with Jimmy John's?
Not only does their founder...
Honestly, Jersey Mike's is better.
Not only does their founder... shoot big game for fun and is just a general jackass. Jimmy John, he's a dick.
Oh, I know.
Their sandwiches subpar. They're not warm. I can make a cold sandwich at my house. If I'm getting a sub at a restaurant, it better be heated up.
I don't always want a warm sub.
Then make a sandwich at home.
No.
Put some turkey and cheese on a fucking 2 pieces of bread and it's the same thing.
No, I want to pay $8 for it.
Well, then, there you go. You can pay $8 from a misogynist to give you a sandwich. Isn't that ironic?
I just want him to make me a sandwich, Krishan.
Well, there we go. If he was in there actually making them himself, I'd go in.
And be annoying?
Me to him or him to me?
You to him.
Oh, yeah. Just to harass him. Hit him. You can't hit.
Be like, oh, yeah, Jimmy John, you good at handling that meat?
I'm not going to fuck the guy.
I bet you do that all day, Jimmy John.
I'm not going to fuck Jimmy John.
Bet you just slap that meat on that bread all day
You're
long.
setting this up like I want to have...
Oh, yeah, spread that mayo,
like
Jimmy
rough sex
John.
with Jimmy John, the sandwich company
It's
owner.
not rough sex, it's just dirty talk.
Dirty talk. I mean, it obviously says it's not going to be a missionary position.
Wow, Jimmy John, you handled those 6 inches just right. Delicately, carefully, wrapped up just how I like it.
You think I'm getting anything but a foot long when I go to a sandwich shop?
You can take a foot long.
Yeah. Not all in one bite, but, I go back a couple of times and it gets the job done.
One bite would be impressive.
This is a long tangent.
Sorry.
For this one joke, one stupid joke that I put in. So what caused...
Give me an inch, I'll take 12 inches. All right.
I'm sure you would. Black Forest ham, anybody?
Kashawn Bachelor.
What? I didn't do anything. So what caused this fast collapse? They had shown some weaknesses before. So let's dig out a skeleton in Silicon Valley Bank's closet and talk about a senior vice president and some insider trading.
Bum, bum, bum.
So I will say that this whole storyline we're about to go on doesn't really have anything to do with the collapse of the bank.
Okay.
But the collapse of the bank is so new, right? And
yeah, within the last month, right?
It was literally last month. And no one has talked about this, which is their highest profile case that's happened to Silicon Valley Bank or involved them. So I figured, let's talk about Mounir, I think that's correct, Gad. Mounir Gad. So according to Mounir Gad's LinkedIn page, he served as a senior vice president in leverage finance for Silicon Valley Bank for almost 8 years in Los Gatos, California. The cats. But they... Yep, that's a cat. You fucking nailed it. But they must have not been paying him enough because in 2015, he engaged in a bit of insider trading using his friend Nathan Guido. That name is seriously his name. Not a nickname. Sad. I have no idea what this man looks like. I have a very vivid picture of what I want him to look like, and I'm just going to go with that. So, because Silicon Valley Bank dealt with primarily startup companies, these companies would often get, as we said, acquired by larger public companies. And Mounir Gad, working in leverage finance, would hear about these early because he worked on the transactions and the negotiations between the two companies. Now, if someone, let's say, knew when a merger was going to happen and bought stock in the smaller company getting acquired, well, they could stand to make a lot of money because usually the stock comes up and evens out with what the price of the acquiring company is, or closer. It rises at least. Of course, Gad knew that if he made the trades himself, he would be immediately found out. So he texted his buddy Guido, telling him that a company by the name of Procera, I don't know which one, was about to be acquired. Shortly after, Guido bought 1,250 shares of the company for $12,101. After the merger was announced, the shares increased in price by around $2 a share, and Guido's portfolio was $2,000 richer. But that's not where it stopped. After this trade, Guido started to share the profits. Gad instructed him to buy stock in another potential acquisition, Imprivata, before the merger was announced. Guido purchased 4,419 shares for $61,450. The day after the merger was announced, the shares were up 31%, and Guido immediately cashed out, realizing a $22,000 gain, of which he shared $5,000 with Gad.
Damn.
And that is still not the end. The last trade before they got caught was a company known as Sysmeck. I'm going to go with Sysmeck.
Yeah.
In text messages recovered from investigators, Gad asked to move over to WhatsApp because it was supposedly encrypted. Mm-hmm. Don't know what that means, but either way, it's funny because the SEC filing then goes on to detail the WhatsApp messages between the two, so they can't be that encrypted. And in them, Gad told Guido to buy stock in Sysmeck because they were going to announce the merger soon. Guido then went off and made the largest purchase yet, 26,022 shares of Sysmeck for $73,406. 2 days later, the merger was announced, and that day, Guido sold the stock, realizing a $27,000 gain, which he shared $6,000 of with Gad. So Gad got $11,000 out of all this. Gad even tried to cover up these trades, as one person making 3 trades like this obviously becomes highly suspicious very fast. So he had Guido make some dummy transactions that were designed not to win, instead, to balance it out. In the end, the SEC began an investigation, and in June of 2021, he settled with the SEC and Department of Justice and avoided jail time with a plea deal while agreeing to pay a fine of $51,700. That's like 5 times more than he made. This is Gad. Not Guido. Guido, there wasn't anything listed in the in either the SEC or the Department of Justice filings that mentioned him, so I don't know. Maybe he flipped on Gad. It's quite possible. He largely avoided jail time in this trial, though, due to 12 outstanding letters of recommendation that came across the judge's desk, claiming great things about Gad's character. Who the hell has 12 friends as an adult?
I've got not 12 friends.
Especially those that would write letters of recommendation for you in a criminal case.
I have like 5 or 6 that probably would.
I got like 3,
Well,
4
maybe you should be a little more friendly.
tops. Well, it turns out, like me, Gad also doesn't have 12 friends that could write letters for him, because one person who wrote one of the letters was present in court. They actually wrote the letter and noticed that when it was read, some content had been added. Then that content just happened to be extra sweet on Gad's character. Realizing that Gad had amended her letter without permission, she contacted the defense attorney, who immediately told the judge.
Jesus.
When confronted, Gad said it was only that letter. All of the rest were true. He
sure.
promises. Well, that also turned out to be a lie. The ones that weren't embellished were fabricated completely. 6 of the 12 letters were not written by the people who had supposedly signed them, and they were actually penned largely by Gad's ex-fiancée. Dick must have been good for her to help him out in court, even after they had already broke up.
Man, I have not had dick that good.
No?
Never. Not to lie about in court.
You're not falsifying some letters to help,
I've
help
never.
a guy get out of court?
The only thing I've falsified is maybe an orgasm.
Maybe, huh?
Maybe.
You don't have to put the maybe on. We all know what's going on.
Once or twice.
Okay, there we go. It's nice to be honest with ourselves, isn't it? Well, because of this, Gad got hit with tampering evidence charges, and on October 27th, 2022, he pleaded guilty and was then sentenced to 15 months in prison with an additional $10,000 fine. So, SVB had at least one mistake in its portfolio. But now, we can get into the nitty-gritty of what took the entire operation down.
Let's go.
So let's talk a little bit about the FDIC.
All right, let's do it.
All right, it'll matter. Trust me. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation was set up in the Banking Act of 1933 to restore trust in the banking system after the runs on the bank that caused the Great Depression. The FDIC insures depositors in banks so that if something happens to the bank, the everyday people with money in the bank will remain whole. They get their money back. Originally, the insurance limit was $2,500 per owner in the 1930s. This limit obviously has increased over the years, and most recently was amended to $250,000 per owner, per account owner, I should say, in the Dodd-Frank Act in 2010. Now, the Dodd-Frank Act is actually another important piece of legislation to our story, as it puts stricter regulations on the banking industry after the inception of the Great Recession, in the hope that it would keep banks from running wild on speculative investments like mortgage-backed securities again. It limited banks from making these speculative investments, and also just changed their oversight a little bit and kind of tamped down on regulations. However, these regulations happen to be rolled back for quote-unquote smaller banks by the Trump administration, which lightened the regulations for all banks that aren't in about like the top 10%. We're talking about like our JP Morgan Chases, our Bank of Americas, our Wells Fargos. Those would keep the regulations. But banks just under that threshold,
don't have
like
to.
Silicon Valley Bank, was no longer under those regulations, under those stricter regulations.
Why?
Why? I mean, that's a whole different...
That's another whole thing.
It's another whole thing, but it was mostly what the right was saying about it at the time, and what the Trump administration was saying about it at the time, is that it's what that side usually says about these things, is that all of this regulation was hindering the free market, was mostly just bureaucracy and caused paperwork for banks that was unnecessary, because they're good at self-regulating, even though it was
even though they've proven that they're not.
literally 10 years before they rolled it back, they proved that they weren't really good at self-regulating.
Right.
But, I mean, whatever. So, at Silicon Valley Bank, they just had deposits increase wildly during the pandemic. Like we said, they had their best year in 2021, and they also had their best year of deposits ever in 2021. However, because their clients were companies in the richest part of America, the GDP of Silicon Valley, by the way, is larger than quite a few countries.
Oh, I 100% believe that. That's not shocking at all.
Yeah, they produce more profit than a lot of other countries, and they also have the third highest GDP of any city in the world.
In the world?
Yeah, any area in the world, right behind Munich, and I forget the other one. I'm not gonna
Interesting.
lie. So a lot of money comes out of the Silicon Valley, obviously. Because of this, though, Silicon Valley Bank, many of their depositors had accounts that held cash far over that $250,000 limit that is insured by the FDIC. We're talking about tens to hundreds of millions of dollars in some of these accounts, like crazy amounts. By the way, the average bank account in America holds in the range of about $40,000.
I know mine does.
Well, this range, of course, is terribly skewed by companies and the 1%. So the median bank account, which is a more accurate representation of the average everyday person's bank account, holds around $5,000. So the $250,000 limit basically only affects those who have a lot of money or companies. So SVB also now had all of this cash deposited into the bank in 2021, more than they'd ever had. And banks don't like to just hold cash. They invest the money in long-term assets to get a return on investment. This is the main money maker for banks. They invest in these long-term investments that most people wouldn't be able to invest in, or a lot of money. So Silicon Valley Bank went out and put about half of their assets into American Treasury bonds. Right? They're the safest things you can buy. We've talked about that. They're seen as the lowest risk investments. So they put half of their assets in there. By the way, $211 billion in assets. So they have, they have like $100 billion in Treasury bonds.
That's insane.
From 2021. The only problem is that after the pandemic, as I'm sure we also all know by now, inflation popped off and continues to pop off. To fight this huge surge in inflation, the Treasury has been slowly increasing federal interest rates. And when they increase federal interest rates, the price of previous bonds begins to fall. They're heavily invested in these bonds. They're not very diversified. And the price of them is falling. So SVB now, on their mark-to-market accounting, reported nearly $15 billion in reduction in assets. And I can't stress this enough, in unrecognized loss. It doesn't change their coupon payments, so like the amount of money they're getting paid periodically. It just changes the value of these bonds on the secondary market. So they can't be sold. If they were to sell them, they would go for a lower price. So mark to market, you remember what that is? So mark to market is where you can't record your assets at the price you paid for them.
Okay.
You have to record them at the price they're worth now.
Yes. But were they recording them at what they paid for them?
No. You can't do that. So what they did is they recorded them at the price they were, but they had gone down.
Yeah.
So they had to do that.
Yeah.
So they were reporting a loss.
Okay.
But it's not recognized. Those bonds could have come back up. They could have made more money. Bonds last for like 10, 20 years, whatever.
They last for for about 20 years.
A long time. So it was a big
I think they even just gain interest for 20 years, and then after 20 years they stop gaining interest.
Well, you get the coupon payments. So what it is they pay you these coupons, they pay you small amounts of interest back as it goes, and then at the end of the bond they give you the exact amount that you paid back to you. And that's when the bond matures.
Yes.
So they weren't really in a lot of danger. It's not like they lost all their money. It's just that right now it looked like their assets were worth a lot less than what they were. That's the 15% decline. But because of this, they had made a call looking for some capital investment, basically because they didn't want this loss to look that bad. They're like, okay, well, we'll get an influx of capital to help balance it out and make it not look as bad. But a group of investors at Silicon Valley Bank had a group chat about the bank, and they claimed that they should be pulling their money out as soon as possible in this group chat.
All right, we all know that this is a bad idea.
But yet it still happens time and time again, right? So they have this conversation between themselves. That conversation makes its way to Twitter.
Oh, great.
And then social media absolutely pops off, if you will, causing panic around Silicon Valley Bank, and the first ever social media fueled bank run ensues.
That's crazy, honestly.
So online banking.
Who leaked it? We don't know.
Probably one of the people in the group just like posted about it in like some small place, and then it just blew up.
Yeah.
Because once one person hears about this and the next person,
they're just going to share it. People are going to share it like crazy.
And online banking made it easier than ever to try and pull your money out immediately and for multiple people to try to do it all at once. And on March 10th, 2023, Silicon Valley Bank set a record for withdrawals in a day with $42 billion in withdrawals in just a single day from the bank.
Oh my gosh.
And it gets worse. Over $100 billion in withdrawals were set for the following day. So they were about to like double the record the next day.
That's crazy. Over double it.
Yeah. No, it was big. And this is the first time this has really happened. And part of it is because people were scared because they didn't meet that FDIC insurance limit. So if they didn't get their money out and they have $10 million in there.
Yeah, they're fucked.
And the bank goes down, something happens,
They're
they
not
only get
getting their money.
$250,000 back. That's it. So obviously, Silicon Valley Bank wasn't liquid enough to meet these withdrawals. They didn't have enough cash on hand. And they appealed to the federal bank for an emergency flush of cash to meet demands. They do this where they'll be like, well, just give us some money now to cover the withdrawals. We have the assets. They're just not liquid. And then we can stick around. But for reasons still unknown, the federal bank declined. Perhaps it's been speculated because Silicon Valley Bank already looked like it was a lost cause. Because that's crazy. Like, okay,
yeah.
You have $211 billion in assets, and you have it set to already have $142 billion pulled out of your bank. Even if we give you however much money,
you're not going to last. Like,
it's just not going to work. So they never saw their next day as the bank declared insolvency, shut down, and the FDIC claimed ownership of the bank after several failed attempts to sell it off.
who are they trying to sell it to? Who would buy it?
So what they do is they sell it off for $1. Literally, another bank just buys it for $1 and pays off these withdrawals, or like if anyone wants more withdrawals, they pay them off, and then they just like take up their assets. But also because I think other companies were also like, well, if the feds don't want to give you emergency money,
I'm not going to give you money.
we're not going to do it either.
Yeah.
So no one wanted it. So this was, as we mentioned, the second largest bank failure in American history, with SVB holding $211 billion in assets. But it was only the first domino. The FDIC at first only promised to pay back the $250,000 that was insured on the accounts at Silicon Valley Bank. But as we mentioned, 85% of the accounts were above this threshold, which is wild. That's above even the average, which is, as we said, is super skewed, but 85% were way above that. And well above it, this scared people, and bank runs are all about psychology. So soon after the fall of Silicon Valley Bank, we also saw the third largest bank failure in American history in Signature Bank, holding $110 billion in assets. They fell a week afterwards, maybe a couple days, not that long. Signature Bank was known as another bank that did a lot of business with cryptocurrency companies, which have been a running theme of company collapses this past year.
Yeah.
Over the past month, many other banks have come under pressure because of these bank collapses. There was one smaller one that was before these two as well, but I didn't mention it, it's smaller. And this stretches outside of American soil even, as Credit Suisse recently was just emergency acquired a week or so ago, maybe 10 days ago, due to a liquidity crisis. They didn't have enough money to pay off withdrawals. Although that acquisition has recently been announced to be under investigative scrutiny by the Swiss government because they think the planning between the purchaser and the government was something corrupt happened in that sale, and it's already under investigation.
Jesus Christ! Well, they're on it.
Yeah, so if something happens about that, we might be able to extend this into another episode. We'll see. Since the collapse, to keep panic at a minimum, though, the U.S. government has announced that they will fully reimburse all the deposits at both Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. All of the depositors will be made whole. They're giving them their entire deposits back. And since then, it has seemed to quell the fire a little. I mean, we've almost gone 3 whole weeks now without a major bank collapse.
Go us!
Isn't that
Look at us
awesome?
go!
After going... How long is that? 15 years? 15 years with that one, you know? Baby steps. You got to start somewhere.
Hey. Yep.
It is important to note, though, that although we can get upset at Silicon Valley Bank for allowing so many accounts to operate at the uninsured amounts that they were at, and that's probably not the best way to run a bank, and it had not been stress tested enough by the government because of those rollbacks in the regulations. This failure does seem to be largely caused by the panic stirred up on social media. These business models were not sustainable, and I don't want to say they were, and were prone to this kind of panic, but hindsight's 2020 at the moment. Bank runs were all about psychology, and it was all about that they had more money in there. This small thing came in about the bonds that they had maybe being really bad for the bank, and a day and a half, whole business gone, which is wild to me. Additionally, the money paid by the FDIC does not come from taxpayers. So you've heard that a lot recently, but I don't think a lot of people know that still. They hear
I didn't know that.
Because when you hear politicians say none of this is going to come from the taxpayers, usually that's just bullshit. And it's kind of bullshit here, but not as much, because it doesn't come from the taxpayers directly, as it did in the 2008 bailouts of banks, where it did just come straight from the taxpayers. The FDIC is an insurance provider. It's insurance. It's got it in their name. So it gets its money from premiums paid by banks. So the banks pay into the insurance, and then they pay the money out of that pool. So they will be increasing the premiums to banks, which no doubt will be directly passed off to taxpayers in the form of lower interest on savings accounts at banks or higher banking fees. So it's, shit rolls downhill.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So it'll get to us one way.
Well, eventually it's going to get to us.
But if you're a crazy uncle and you keep all the cash in your mattress,
good to go.
You're fucking set. This is the first time your crazy uncle was right.
My grandpa hid a bunch of money in his house. We don't know where it is. He's dead. We're fucked.
It's probably. Have you checked the walls?
I know of one place one thing is.
Just go in and rip up the walls. Fuck it. It's just a note that says, lol, fuck you.
Lol, I was poor, actually.
He got you. He fucking
Okay,
got
well.
you. The government is also not reimbursing any investors in Silicon Valley Bank, only account holders.
Interesting.
So anyone who supported the business model leaves with zilch. All the people who need their money to do their payrolls can keep their businesses afloat.
That's fair.
So I did see one thing where it's like, you want to be like, this is just another bailout, another too big to fail, like the rich get richer kind of thing. But really what it is the only money going back, they are rich people. They own businesses in Silicon Valley. Like, don't get me wrong, but they weren't the ones doing anything wrong.
Right.
Because I also don't know, maybe someone out there knows, I don't know. What do you do if you are a corporation and you need to hold money of more than $250,000? Is that basically just like the government going like, well,
fuck you.
You're fucked.
I don't know.
You shouldn't have started a business if you don't want the risk. That could be the answer. I don't know.
That would be really shitty.
Or maybe like it's a separate for like commercial banking. I have no idea. So if you know,
let us know.
Let us know
because we're confused.
Because we don't
understand.
No. So as of right now, no criminal charges obviously have come from these collapses. It's way too soon. We will have to see in the coming months what the future holds. Although right now I would say it seems unlikely. I don't think anyone's
I'd be shocked if anybody actually.
No one got charged in the 2008 financial crisis. No one's getting charged.
No, it'll just...
Because in 2008, there was a lot more sketchy stuff going on.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we'll find more here.
Right.
But there was a lot of sketchy stuff going on in 2008. Lehman Brothers, listen to it. So, is this the first of the dominoes? And are more banks about to fall? Will any criminal indictments come out of the mismanaging of Silicon Valley Bank? Is this truly the end times? Why are we asking even more rhetorical questions in the outro? We don't know the answers to these questions. We are not experts, although we have talked through quite a few cases here in the past. What we can say is that multiple large bank failures so close together aren't usually a sign that things are going hunky-dory for our economy. Understanding what went wrong with Silicon Valley Bank is important for making sure that we don't repeat the past. But the fact that other banks that were teetering originally haven't fallen in the past few weeks is a good sign. As always, we will keep you updated if anything of extreme importance comes to light, and hopefully none of our listeners are billion-dollar tech investors in the Bay Area. But if you are, you can crash on our couch for a couple of nights, but...
You can crash on Kashan's couch.
Yeah, Niner doesn't have a couch.
You're right.
But she's been to a couple of them. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. Silicon Valley Bank. It was a little bit different because, once again, no charges.
It's in progress. It's a thing in progress.
Yeah, we talked about Mounir Gad. So let us know if you like these kind of things. We're trying to just do stuff that's in the public right now. But it's a little bit different. So so let us know if you liked it. You want to let us know if you liked it? Well, there are some easy ways to do that. You can leave a review on either Apple Podcasts. Well, you can write a review on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating there. Or you can just leave us a rating, 5 out of 5 stars on Spotify if you'd like to do that. You can also leave a comment on our new YouTube channel, White Collars, Red Hands.
Hell yeah, go subscribe.
Go subscribe. Yeah, we want to get them subscribers. Hit that bell.
Hit that notification bell.
Yeah, hit that. Now's a good time to remind you to hit that thumbs up in the corner. We're one of those people now, and I'm sorry. I'm so terribly sorry. You want to connect with us on another way? You're not watching on YouTube? That's easy because you can just go to facebook.com/whitecollarsredhands. Twitter at whitecollarspod, Instagram at whitecollars_redhands. You can go to our website, whitecollarsredhands.com.
Hell yeah.
You can check out our TikTok, White Collars Red Hands. And when you're on the website, by the way, you can check out our merch. Hit a little button says check out our merch. Buy a t-shirt, buy a hoodie, buy a mug.
Can't buy a beanie though.
Buy a sticker. Can't buy a beanie. Sorry. It's almost summer, so don't worry. Unless you're listening in Australia, in which case, sorry.
We do have some listeners in Australia.
Couple
Good day.
Couple of them Aussies listen to the Akadaka episode. Akadaka. Lovely. I actually think that's how they say it. I still think about that sometimes. Mm-hmm. I think that's how they say it. Did I hit everything?
I think so.
All right. Well, either way, I'm kind of dying, so we're going to stop recording.
We're going to just take a little break.
So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on another episode of White Collars, Red Hands.